My hair's down, the lighting's bad. I'm talking about my most disappointing reads from last year. My name's Samantha, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to talk about that tiny little pie slice from my reading list of the books that I didn't like so much last year. Now, I didn't hate any books, but I should still caution you that I didn't love these books. I'm just calling them my most disappointing reads. So if we look at my little pie chart, you'll know, all right, I consumed 103 books total in 2019. And of those books, the largest slice there are the 4-star reads at 51 books, or 50%. And then I read 25 5-star reads. That's pretty dang good. And that's about 23%. 21 3-star reads and 7 2-star reads. I did not have any 1-star reads, so I obviously didn't find any books so offensive or atrocious that I had to reward it for that purpose. So today we're going to talk about those 2-star reads for the most part and a few of the 3-star reads that truly disappointed me. There's going to be a lot of graphic novels on here, just fair warning. The very first of which is The Umbrella Academy by Gerard Wade. This is okay. I think I gave it 3 stars in the end, but it was disappointing for me. In particular, the Apocalypse Suite. Yeah, it's the first book, because we're supposed to be laying the groundwork for this really new, cool world and this cool, like, I want to call them superheroes, but we get very little back history into any one of these characters. This book follows 7 characters that have these supernatural powers, and all we know is that they were born of women who were suddenly pregnant and gave birth one day, and that they were gathered up by this professor to teach them how to hone their skills, I guess. I don't know. But they have this whole history before the book even begins, which we don't really get, and I really wish that we had gotten that before moving on to the Apocalypse Suite, which it was fine. It was just fine. My next encounter came by way of another graphic novel. I read the first volume, which is the bind-up of the first 10 comics of I Hate Fairyland, and I didn't hate this book, but it was kind of repetitive. This book follows a little girl who's abducted, essentially, kind of by way of Alice in Wonderland, and she just ends up in this super saccharine fairy world. It's essentially Candyland on steroids, and it's super yikes. She has a goal of getting back home, and she has to find a key to do that, and she has a little, I think he's a bug guide to help her out. The book then fast forwards about 30-ish years into the future, and she is still there, and she snaps and starts going on this killing spree. And she's just pissing off the Queen of Fairyland and all this other stuff. She's just making enemies. The artwork is really cool in this book, so I do recommend it in a way. I don't know if I want to continue on with the series. I'm like half in, half out. Welcome to my most disappointing read of 2019. I have no idea what year we're in. Welcome to Night Vale by Jeffrey Cranor and Joseph Fink. I am a new fan to the podcast series, and I'm at the point where I've caught up and I can listen to it as they roll out each episode. When I got to this book, I realized, oh, this is so much different from the actual podcast. It's like night and day. The writing in here, as much as it seems like the podcast, which is dark and quirky, it's very stagnant. It's overdone to a point where it's just... I did listen to this on audiobook because it is narrated by Cecil Baldwin, which is, if you're a fan of the podcast, and you're probably a fan of Cecil, so it was worth listening to. This book actually follows some of the side characters to the book, one of which is Diane Creighton, and it's also the story of her son who is trying to figure out their father or where they came from. This is the kid that can change form. Also linked in here is the origin story of the man in the tan jacket, which I kind of wish we never got that mystery kind of revealed in any way, because it's just so bizarre and weird. And now onto the only nonfiction book on my list, which is All You Leave Behind by Erin Lee Carr. This is a grief memoir in homage to Erin's late father, David Carr, who was a writer or reporter for the New York Times. I obviously wasn't one of his fans, so maybe that's how I missed the mark. What I got from this book wasn't so much the sadness of the loss of a parent, but it was really that she can no longer ride his coattails to help bolster her career. It was a frustrating read because it was just kind of like an FU to the face of everyone who works their asses off and to get into the business of media and entertainment. But, you know, it depends on who you know in order to get there. So this book does have some really great interviewing tips in it, so I recommend it still, especially if you were a fan of David's, and also if you are a fan of Erin's documentaries. I do hope that she keeps writing other memoirs or writing anything really, because I didn't mind the writing at all, and I think she does have some interesting points to make. In my Goodreads note about this book and my thoughts on it, I did note a bunch of topics that I thought she would be great with penning. Now, contrary to the Goodreads awards, I did not care for Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Yes, I am a big fan of the Evelyn Hugo, but I really didn't care for this. I was just bored to tears. It reminded me so much of VH1 Behind the Music version of a fake band who got together to do what was like 1.5 tours and make one album together, because it was, you know, the greatest thing of all time. I was bored. I was really, really bored. I did listen to part of this on the audiobooks, and it was fine. It is a full cast, and it's really kind of cool. I don't buy Judy Greer as an elderly woman, but, you know, whatever. I did reward this about 3 stars because, let me tell you, as bored as I was, you cannot tell me that you can write dialogue and somehow manage to give me a full picture of a scene and have me like convinced that I was there. So yeah, Taylor Jenkins Reid is definitely a great writer, but yeah, this story was boring as all hell. I don't know why I was torturing myself, but of course I read Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a romance. Borderline chick lit romance. I don't like that stuff at all. This is about a young woman who, she's pretty much down, she hasn't hit rock bottom, not yet, quite yet, anyway. Everything's in her life is going wrong. Her romance sucks and she doesn't have a job and all this other crap, so, you know, cliche story. Anyway, she moves in with her best friend. They go out one night, she meets up with her old ex-boyfriend, and then here we have a timeline split. So in one scenario, she goes off with her ex, and then in the other, she goes home with her friend. And those two storylines are what makes up this entire book. They reflect each other to a point of they literally repeat each other line by line on occasion, and it is really annoying. It's supposed to be this cross between a romance and a little bit of a sci fiction type thing, because they're talking about the multi-worlds theory in a way. They even talk about it at the end twice. The bottom line is that this book was super, super predictable, no matter what timeline you end up in, and it was just fine. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I consumed this book for the Reading Rush readathon. I read the ebook and I watched the movie. This was for the adaptation prompt thingy. This book follows a bounty hunter who's supposed to be taking out androids that are killing humans. And it also follows this guy that I guess you would call him a sympathizer for these android characters, but he's just slow and he has like a building and he's just housing them, and he works for this guy that helps manufacture fake animals. Now, animals, to own a real one, because they're pretty much all extinct, it is a sign of class and high, it makes you look like you're worth a lot of money. So this book is really more about consumerism. Conceptually, yes, this book is really cool, and I was dying for an android book. I love AI related type fiction. Right now I'm on like a big kick for it, but I thought the point of this book was that the main character was also an AI android type being, because everyone was so lifeless and dry and zero personality. But you know, no. I clearly have an unpopular opinion of this book, but the writing in this book was not great. I don't know why everyone loves it so much, and it's held to such a high standard. And I get that it was written in the 1970s, so all of the sexism and what was essentially the male gaze, there's a lot of breast imagery in this book, which is okay, fine, but there's no point to it. It's just a reason to talk about boobs. That's all I got out of it. Bad writing and cool concept though, so keep loving it. Don't yell at me. 10,000 Bones is a world in which calcium is actually used as currency instead of, you know, like paper money. This book follows a detective. She's a collection agent, and she kind of turns into this detective cop, rogue cop character, and she's trying to investigate some calcium that's being filtered through the black market system and, you know, embezzled and blah 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 blah. I read this as a NetGalley review, and it took me a long time to get through it because I just wasn't buying that main character. She is essentially a caricature of what you would find as a female cop on like TV shows. When it comes down to it, she's doing this investigation of like trying to figure out who's I want to say embezzling calcium, and then we meet like 5 people in this entire book. So I mean, who else could there be? Like, come on. And welcome back to the graphic novel portion of this video, Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan. I read the first volume, which is a bind-up of the first 3 graphic novel books. This took me a lot longer to get through than I was expecting it to, because I was kind of a mix of bored and confused all at the same time. This book it opens with a bunch of paper girls in the 1980s, and there's this kind of, I guess, like an apocalypse type event that's happening this night, and the girls just go out of their way and assume things are happening, because apparently there are things happening, but going frame to frame, I just felt like I was missing information. So I feel like this was more of a visual loss rather than like it could have been written a little bit better. But there's just, we'll go from one frame with like the girls have met some character, and then oh, suddenly they're gone, and we just assume that they literally disappeared or that they evaporated or what. But I have no idea, again, if I want to continue on with this graphic novel series. It's not like it's a difficult read, it's just I don't want to be bored and I don't want to be disappointed. So should I carry on with it? If you've read it, please let me know. Welcome back to the Mistborn series. As you'll note in the last video that I posted on my favorites, the Hero of Ages was my favorite. It's probably one of my favorite finales of all time. It couldn't be outdone. I don't want to say that this extension to the series is proof of that, but it was essentially just okay. This series builds upon the elements that we learned from the initial Mistborn trilogy, and that we have an introduction to new metals, including actual metal weaponry like, guns. This series follows Waxilium, who's a lawman and essentially a recast version of Elend, and his comic relief partner, Wayne. Part of me that didn't enjoy this book was probably because I listened to this entire series on audiobook. I don't think I've endured a more bored sounding narration of a book in my experience, which is really sad and alarming considering how action-packed this book is. What also got to me was that the plot was pretty much the same throughout the series, and I really felt like we could just use maybe 1 or 2 fewer train robberies. I did enjoy this book, but I had high expectations on it. Not so much the first 2, because I know that traditionally everyone was saying they're fine, they're just fine, and I felt that way throughout. I felt that the finale was rushed quite a bit, and it concluded way too quickly. It needed more time to evolve, and I just felt like in the end I liked it. I didn't love it as much as I was expecting. So we made it to the end of the era, and we made it to the end of this video. I hope you were entertained and that you're not too mad at me about not enjoying Daisy Jones so much. Anyway, I would love to know what your most disappointing book was from this year. That's it for now. I will see you in the next video. We're moving onward and upward to 2020, and we're moving and shaking. Until next time, I will see you soon. Bye.